Dragon's Dogma 2 recently released with some major discourse in the community, from the microtransactions to the performance issues to 30 FPS on consoles. But even with all this discourse and buried underneath all this shit is a diamond hidden waiting for Capcom to fix their goddamn product. I love this game. It feels like a true rough, rigged, and raw RPG. From the combat to the exploring and the scale of the world, everything is just so fun when it works. But on the same hand, there's some unacceptable trash that's occurring that should have not been released in this state. I'm going to be diving into both of them. Let's try to start off on a positive note. Dragon's Dogma 2 is literally just more Dragon's Dogma. What I mean by this is most of the good systems from the first game were brought over to this one and improved on in some type of way without making too many changes and making it feel like a totally different game. This one just feels like an upgraded version of Dragon's Dogma, so thank God for that, because after playing the first game some years ago, there was really no other game that could scratch the itch of this formula like Dragon's Dogma is able to. Starting off with the character creation. This is an obvious improvement off of the first one. You're really able to create unique characters and pawns from scratch and make them look exactly how you want. I've seen plenty of people make characters from different shows, movies, or games they like, as well as absolute abomination, especially when I get new pawns from the Rift. It's always a treat being able to see what people make. The only issue I have with character creation is if you can even get past it and into the damn game. I've seen many people that can't even get past the character creation without the game crashing over and over on PC. Thank God I didn't run into this problem, but this should not be happening on a $70 AAA game. Other than that, the character creation, in my opinion, is really good for what it has, and you're able to sculpt almost anything on the body to get exactly what you want. I personally don't dive too far into the character creation, but I think it's good enough for the people that spend hours on this. Moving on to something a bit more interesting, the combat. Combat always feels very engaging and fun throughout the game, especially from the wide varieties of playstyles you can engage in with the different vocations offered. You want to be a basic bitch, pick warrior. Want to be edgy, pick thief. Want to slang around a pointy stick, pick mystic spearhand. Being able to change these playstyles at any point throughout the game really keeps everything feeling fresh, especially if you start to get bored with the combat at any point. But I still haven't gotten bored with it, so I don't think it'll get dull anytime soon. Being able to climb bigger monsters in this game is another thing that I really love about it. It really feeds into that power fantasy of defeating a bigger foe. Having to make your way up a creature and stab it over and over in the face and watching it fall, ooh, something about it is just so satisfying every time. Or climbing onto a griffin and having it take off while you're still on it. When I first experienced this, I was blown away. This is what open world RPGs were made for. Moments like this. Not only does it take off with you on its back, but you can make your way up to its head, hit him a few times, and make the griffin fall out of the sky. Even if you don't like this game, you gotta admit, that's pretty fucking cool. The last thing I'm gonna say about the griffin is how it can randomly dive bomb onto you out of nowhere at any time. I remember I was fighting an ogre in a cave, and there was an opening on the side of it, and in comes a griffin trying to fuck up my day. This is arguably one of the coolest creatures to fight in the game, but on the same hand, this is where my critiques come in about the combat. There isn't much enemy variety in Dragon's Dogma 2. Yeah, you get a few new baddies as you progress through the story, but overall, I think the game needed to spice up the types of enemies to fight. The main thing you fight in the open world when traveling from place to place are the ogres, goblins, bandits, and if you're by some water or some shit like that, you get those lizard guys. This just isn't enough to stay hyped over random fights. I remember randomly seeing my first Reaper enemy, and this was such a cool fight to have. I just wish more things like this happened throughout the game instead of the same enemies over and over. Don't get me wrong, the combat itself is fun, I just need a little bit more variety when it comes to the enemies themselves. Well, we actually do have one more enemy I didn't mention yet, the goddamn camera. You'll be fighting against the camera the whole game, especially in tight areas like caves or tunnels, but mainly when you're trying to fight bigger monsters. My camera always ends up just going crazy, being put in places where I can't see what the fuck is going on, or when I'm climbing, it will just basically put me inside the monster's asshole. It's a good thing the combat is this fun because I can see the camera easily ruining it for a lot of people, since there's been plenty of times where a bad camera placement has caused me to die. I honestly can't even think of a way for the camera to be fixed because of the nature of the game, but it's something I can deal with, so it's nothing too detrimental for me personally. I just thought I should mention it because it gets pretty jarring at times. Moving on to the way scale is done. Now, the map itself is a decent size, but I think the way exploring is done makes it seem way bigger than what it actually is. Because of no mounts and no immediate way to fast travel, as well as the constant encounters you run into, it just boosts the scale of the game in terms of how the map is being perceived. I feel if we were to have mounts in the game, it would make this map feel way smaller than what it is. This rolls into the exploration portion as well. Because of having to walk everywhere, it has you really slow down and actually take in the environment and the vibe of the world around you, making you really dive into the RPG side of this game, until you hear the pawns constantly saying some dumb shit over and over again. But they've saved me more times than not, so it's okay for them to keep blabbering to me. Speaking of the blabbering that happens in Dragon's Dogma, the way that all the NPCs talk and the vocabulary that they use is great in my opinion. The word choices being used really help dive you into the immersion of being in this specific world. Small things like when everyone says me-self instead of myself in conversations, and other dialogue similar to this. It's just a small sprinkle on the cake, but I think it does a lot hearing lines like this. The pawn system is great and another improvement from the first game. I haven't had as many problems with the pawns getting stuck or just not listening like I did in Dark Arisen, so this is definitely a positive. I also enjoy the small touches of when your personal pawn comes back from another world, they'll give you a little explanation of how that player was treating them or how they were playing. It just makes the world seem a little bit bigger with these little explanations. I also like how the other pawns in your party don't level along with you. Having you go to the Riftstone and personally pick out the pawns every couple of levels keeps things fresh. You also get to look at what other people created. It's a unique way of doing multiplayer that I've never seen in another game. Time for the trash of the game. Let's start off with the performance. Why the fuck is a $70 game performing like this? It's insane to me. Mind you, it happens in the city specifically because in the open world, it's not too many issues, maybe a couple from time to time, but in the cities, it becomes almost unplayable. And I don't understand why, nor do I care to understand why. This should just not happen on a release. And it's becoming more and more of an issue of just releasing a game and fixing it later. It's unacceptable at this point. I've tweaked a couple graphic settings to make it at least playable, but anytime I have to go back to the main city Vermont, or Vermont, however you say it, it's just a complete buzzkill. And to top it off, cities aren't even that populated, so it really doesn't make sense. The microtransactions are another thing that's pretty shitty. Mind you, these microtransactions literally mean nothing in the game nor affect the playthrough, but having a list of microtransactions at the store before you buy a game can make plenty of people turn away from it. It's made me turn away from a couple of games simply because I didn't feel like looking into them to see if I would need them. The only thing I worry about for the future of games as a whole are developers making games worse in order for consumers to pay for the convenience through these microtransactions, which is probably what's going to start happening more. But we'll see. Overall, I'm really enjoying Dragon's Dogma 2 despite the performance issues it has at the moment. The game feels like a true RPG you could sink countless hours into trying to find every secret or just getting lost looking around. This is what open worlds were made for. I would definitely recommend waiting until the game is fully fixed before buying it though, or don't. It's your money, not mine.